Now you remember we were talking about values, what we value as human beings, how that's hard to change, and how our beliefs are hard to change, but our attitudes and opinions kind of shift depending on who's talking to us sometimes. Well, there's some folks that came up with a theory, or actually it was one man, Martin Fishbein, took this elaboration likelihood model and he expanded it a bit. And he said, look, we have values, we have beliefs, we have attitudes and opinions. We then have intentions. We intend to do something, and then there is the final action. What do we actually do? And because of our values and beliefs and our attitudes and opinions, we intend to do a certain thing. It's like I used to tell my mother, and I still do, God bless her, rest her soul, I meant to be good. You know? But sometimes it just didn't turn out that way, Mom, and I apologize. I'm sorry. Right? We intended to do something. We intended not to buy that. But we did. And Martin Fishbein came up with a theory called reasoned action. That there's a reason we can move from intention to action and do something entirely different than what we intended. He said there's two major contributors to this. The first one he called the relative advantage. Right? What's the relative advantage? If I do this, what's the cost-benefit analysis? If I come to you with a proposition that kind of goes against where you've been, but now remember, you can't talk people into something they won't. But in the back of their mind, there's this tiny little seed of being ornery. They just might do it. Right? How can I talk them into it? And the cost-benefit. If the benefits exceed the cost, the relative advantage says, let's do it. Right? Now the other one, the other thing that impacts it, I said there were two, is what's called the subjective norm. N-O-R-M. Now I'm not talking about the guy at the end of the bar in Cheers. In this case, norm means a standard of behavior that is the common standard of behavior. And it is subjective, depending on who's defining it. Our peers, the people who are important to us. Now, we intend to behave a certain way, to do a certain thing. And someone comes along and gives us a point of view that we think makes sense, where the benefits exceed the costs. Now, what will my peers think? What will the other people think? Will they approve or not approve? If they don't approve, then I have to go back and say, well, that's an additional cost. Am I willing to take that heat, take the risk for doing that? All right, let me give you a couple examples. Lesbian and gay people who are afraid to come out to their parents. What's the cost? What's the benefit? What will their peers think? Right? Tough. It's hard on these people. Really hard on gay men. Really hard. How come I know so much about this? One of my children is a lesbian. Okay? And so I know a lot about this, and lots of discussions about this. I've written a book on the subject called Fighting the Merchants of Hate. All right? I went all the way to the Wisconsin Supreme Court fighting the anti-gay marriage amendment. I lost, but I got there. So I know a lot about this subject. And so that competition between values and peers, they so much would like to get it out and live their life, but what will their peers think? You see, so that's tough. Now let me give you another example which really shows how this works. Let's say there is a convention in Las Vegas, right? And it's for people who sell electronics, right? And there's this young man, and let's say he's 35, and he's from Mobile, Alabama, and he is at this convention. And he has a good job for a good company back home in Mobile. He's got a wife and 2 little rugrats, 2 little kids. Everything is good in his life back in Mobile. And then there's this woman there. And she's 34. And she's from, let's say, Gary, Indiana. And she has a really good job and a good husband, loves him, 2 little kids, great career, everything's fine. And they meet at this convention. They're in the same meetings a couple times. And she hears him ask a question, and he hears her ask one, and they talk at the cocktail hour after the convention all day when the vendors are giving away crab legs and booze, you know. And the next day, same thing, they notice each other, and so they decide to have dinner together at the end of the day, and the next thing you know, they're having breakfast in bed. All right? They had a one-night stand. Now that happens a million times a day. I'm not judging people who do that. I'm making no comment about it. But it happens. Now let's look at this theory of reasoned action. All right? What's the relative advantage of doing that? Well, what is the cost benefit, we say? Well, what is the benefit of that one night stand? Well, it was exciting. It was fun. I had an adrenaline rush. Sexual release. That's about it. You know. What's the potential cost? Well, a spouse, children, home, and career. There's no way that makes sense, does it? That makes no sense whatsoever. Now, what will your peers think? The subjective norm. Oh my God, your parents will disown you. Your friends won't speak to you. Your kids are going to be heartbroken. Your sister's going to call you a tramp. Doesn't make any sense, does it? No. So why'd you do that? It's simple. Because people convince themselves no one will know. And since no one will know, there's no cost. Right? There's no danger. No one's going to know. So the cost is 0 and the benefit is 5. Why not? And peers? Who's the peer? Who is the subjective norm when we make these decisions? It's our ego and our superego. We feed ourselves. And that's where most decisions get us in trouble. We convince ourselves of things that aren't true. Therefore, we'll buy that thing we can't afford. We'll sleep with that woman we probably shouldn't be sleeping with. We will do those things we probably shouldn't have done. Because our ego tells us to do it. And there are advertisers and people out there who know this theory like they know their name. And they trigger that ego. You never hear an ad talking about the cost except for pharmaceuticals. Man, you listen to a pharmaceutical ad, everything's going to make you constipated, blind, and dead. You know, take this, the side effects are. But they sell you stuff, everything you see on TV except pharmaceuticals. They don't talk about the cost. It's all benefits. And it's all designed with symbols and pictures to feed your ego. They don't try to sell a hot rod, a beautiful, fast car. I don't even know what they are. In my old age, it was Corvettes and Thunderbirds. I don't know what's out there now. But they don't sell a car that they're trying to sell a 25-year-old single man with a woman standing next to it in a long dress and a string of pearls. It's some beautiful young girl, and her skirt's barely below her underwear, and she's gorgeous, and she's standing next to that car. Why? The ego of this man and the benefit of this car. Not a word about cost. The woman with the pearls, the long dress, she's standing next to the Cadillac and the Lexus for the same reason. Fishbein says, forget values, forget beliefs, forget attitudes and opinion. Get in there between the intention of the action, the intention and the action, and convince them that the benefits exceed the cost and feed their ego, and you'll get them every time. You know what? It works. It works. All right, one more theory quickly that ties all these together. And it's called the diffusion theory. The diffusion of innovation and ideas says that what we need to do, and I've said this before, is find out what they need and what they want. What are the problems they want solved? Remember, we heard this in cognitive dissonance. What are the needs and the things they want? What do they value and believe? What are the benefits? Now we begin to sell our program. When the United Nations first tried to sell birth control in India, they had a very difficult time because the women served the men when the men wanted served. And the men wanted children to help them work in the fields. That was the value. But a value was also determined that the woman knew if she kept having kids at that rate, she was going to die young and her children would have no mother. And without a mother, her girls are likely to be sold. And so they were able to convince many of the Indian women to get birth control and to control the size of the family so they could take better care of their children. Simple things like brushing your teeth in the Appalachians worked on the same thing. When we diffuse an innovation, we have to find out what people need and we have to have a solution. And then we find what's called an early adapter. Someone who does it so other people can see. Observability. They see it being done. All right? Then they're allowed to try it. Trialability. And when they try it and they like it, they'll do it again. They'll become an opinion leader saying, this is good. I feel better from this. Right? Then we're back to classical conditioning, aren't we? I did it, I liked it, I'm going to do it again. Back before Socrates, Aristotle said persuasion comes down to three things. Ethos, logos, and pathos. What is ethos in Greek? Man, the person. Remember we said, who's the spokesman? The person can help persuade you. Who is it? Logos. What is the logic of your argument? Does it make sense? That can help persuade. And then he said, pathos. Emotion. You reach people with emotion. And you can convince them. Now, all of these theories, all that we've talked about, the 7 theories and the ethos, logos, and pathos of Aristotle, all have to happen in a period that is kind of quick, in a thing we call the motivated sequence. The motivated sequence says, I get your attention. I discover your need. What do you want? I figure out how to satisfy your need. I help you visualize it. And when you see that I have the answer to your need, I convince you to do it now. Time is the enemy of the persuader. We have to get you to do it now. So, as a warning, folks, take your time and think it over. It'll still be available in the morning.